Hey my fire starters, welcome to the more interesting than good experiment. Rather than make my ever-increasing in length videos and leave the channel dormant in between each of them, I've decided to cover more of the movies that inspired me to make this channel in the first place. While my original plan was to have a blowout month of shorter videos every day, you guys have spoken and would rather have them weekly. So instead, at the end of each month, my patrons will decide which of that month's videos will get the full blowout treatment like I've done with Cigarette Burns, Gretel and Hansel, House of Leaves, and The Resurrected. If you'd like to join them, go to patreon.com/Justin D. Hurd and pledge at least $1 a video. That will get you extra perks, as well as access to the end of the month episode poll. When we hit 50 subscribers, I have a 2-hour Hellraiser retrospective waiting in the wings. Well, now that we got that out of the way, let's jump into it. My name is Justin D. Hurd, and this is Dubious Consumption. Man, The Hole is one of those hidden gems that unfortunately has been papered over with the release of Joe Dante's 2009 version, along with all the other movies called The Hole. Focusing on a weekend party gone wrong in an abandoned bunker, The Hole deals with the aftermath when only one of the 4 that went in comes out. Liz is the ordinary quiet girl at school with a crush on the local popular guy Mike. Her best friend Martin is the nerd with a crush on her.
I'm not gay!
But the popular girl, Frankie, pities her. So, with a little conniving, they cruel intentions their way into an exclusive party while the rest of their classmates were away on a school trip. Liz emerges from the hole, battered and quite mad. While the police are attempting to find answers, we return to her story time and time again as it unravels and we eventually learn the whole truth. This is a story about the telling of it. In recovery, Liz is interviewed by psychologist Dr. Horwood, played by Embeth Davidtz, who we talked about previously when I covered Fallen. She attempts to coax the story out of Liz, but is immediately dismissive of her first version of the time in the bunker, stating,
"She thinks she spent the last week in fucking Disneyland."
Oh, yeah. I mean, how delusional can she be?
Of course, this first story is complete bullshit. In it, the door just shockingly opens and they escape all perfectly fine, yet we know only one of the 4 escaped. It's the whole premise, so it's immediately suspect that this is where she leaves it off. Once the police collect Martin, he offers a different version of events. Liz and Frankie are actually queen bee besties that absolutely hate Martin. Liz is trying to hook up with Mike and uses Liz to invite him through his best friend Jeff. They promise an entirely extracurricular, exclusive party full of drugs, sex, and debauchery. Unfortunately for everyone involved, both Mike and Jeff are far more interested in Frankie than the altogether timid Liz. When Liz disrupts an impromptu threesome, she pisses off Mike and is further isolated from the rest of the group, especially once Jeff and Liz start hooking up. Meanwhile, Martin is released and immediately tracks down Liz. Maybe not the best idea there, my dude. He's pissed because she's ruined his life and she states that the police have nothing on him and she knew he'd be able to get away. Turns out the 2 of them had planned this to some degree. I don't know. When Dr. Horwood finds Liz, she's shaking and crying. She manages to convince Liz to tell her what actually happened, but Liz will only do it at the bunker. Back in the hole, Mike decides he's going to leave now that Frankie and Jeff are hooking up. Liz opts to tag along him leaving, but presses her advantage by trying to pursue him even though he's clearly not interested. When she realizes that this will be the last chance she has, she climbs to the door first and locks it while everyone else is distracted. The group immediately turns on her but quickly realizes that it couldn't be her fault, and instead they turn to what they need to survive, rationing their supplies. Jeff has an absolutely killer speech about what will happen during dehydration.
After you start to feel thirsty, find yourself feeling impatient, maybe even a little sick, and your pulse starts to go up. Then there's the headaches, dizziness. When it gets bad, your vision will blur and you'll find it hard to walk and talk. Your tongue swells up, your skin shrivels, twitch, you go deaf. And then you die.
And that they only have 4 days once the water runs out. Eventually, Mike and Liz start to hook up, only to be interrupted by Jeff, who tells them that Frankie is sick and won't stop throwing up. Liz goes in to check on her, only to ramble on about hooking up with Mike, oblivious to the amount of pain her best friend is in. Eventually, Liz realizes just that, and tries to comfort Frankie by telling her that she thinks they'll be rescued tomorrow, and asks Frankie to try and last that long. That night, Liz retrieves the key and goes to open the bunker, only to find her best friend dead. One of my favorite choices about this last version of the story is that with each death we're pulled out and told the results of their respective autopsies. So we get both perspectives, the heartless teenager explaining the circumstances of how her friends died, and the empathetic psychologist's knowledge of how much pain they went through.
Frances was bulimic. We know that from the lack of enamel on her teeth. The dramatic bleeding came from a tear in her esophagus. She died on the 10th day from heart failure.
I absolutely love the look on Embeth's face as she processes the information. You can see how much it destroys her, but she can't say anything lest she interrupt Liz and maybe never find out what actually happened. At that point, the group is absolutely broken. Liz rightfully blames herself for the death, and Mike attempts to pull her out of that spiral. Jeff does blame Liz, and he loses his shit, only to be confronted by Mike. Liz is caught by Mike taking the key out of her boot, though he didn't know what she was doing. Moments before she confesses, Jeff opens a Coke he had secreted away. Mike attacks him and ends up bashing his head in on the edge of a pit in the middle of the room. After that, Liz tries to talk Mike into committing suicide with her, but he once again has hope that they will survive and confesses his love for Liz. Once he has fallen asleep, Liz goes and opens the door. Mike is immediately suspicious, and when she confesses what she did...
You fucking bitch! Fucking whore! You fucking bitch! Oh,
He absolutely loses his shit once again and attempts to climb the ladder to her in a frenzy. Loose bolts break and end up killing him in the fall. Back in the present, Dr. Harwood attempts to convince Liz to give a statement, but Liz refuses. Before she can press forward, Dr. Harwood is interrupted by the lead detective. Liz immediately says she was afraid Dr. Harwood was going to hurt her, and Detective Holland says that they found Martin had committed suicide with the key to the bunker on him. The film ends with Liz eyeballing Dr. Harwood and smirking. The Hole is one of those films that feels like it was meant to be a breakout hit for all involved, like The Faculty, only for it to be undercut by Dimension Pictures. It had a small theatrical run in the UK where it made just under $8 million, but for some reason, Dimension decided to hold it for 2 years before dumping it direct to DVD in America. I will say that the ending of this one can be particularly unsatisfying because it's not like Liz did anything that clever to get away with it. She's the only survivor, and the lead suspect ends up in the reservoir behind her house. She even fucking confessed to a professional who had said she was suspicious. But no, they find the detective's lead suspect dead, and they just close the damn book on it. And that's it. What did you think of The Hole? Did you get a chance to trip over this one as a rental, or has it been completely overshadowed by the more recent 2009 dark fantasy horror film? Had you seen this early Keira Knightley film, or had it just passed you by? As always, you can find me on Twitter at JustinDHeard or on my website, justindheard.com. We also have merch available. Links below. Please consider supporting us on Patreon like these fine people: Chris Markinson, Stormy OK, Bryce Cleek, Dave Ferguson, and Catherine C. Thanks for fueling this experiment. If you want to support the channel as well, you can do so for as little as $1 per video. You get access to the videos early, scripts, as well as commentaries for each video. At the end of this month, and every month we do this experiment, my patrons will choose which one of this month's shorter videos are going to get turned into a full-blown episode. We've also got a 2-hour Hellraiser series retrospective for when we hit 50 patrons.
Come to Daddy.
Thank you for sticking to the end of the episode. My name is Justin D. Hurd. This has been Dubious Consumption, and I'm outro.